Adam's out in the garden, lonely, walking around, depressed. God looks down and goes, "What's the matter?" He goes, "I'm just lonely. I need a companion. I need something." God goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll make you a woman." Woman? What's a woman? Well, it's somebody who's going to clean your house and do your laundry, and it's going to have your babies and never ask you in the middle of the night to get up with them. It's going to never nag you, is always going to agree with every decision you make, and is going to never have a headache and make love any time of day and night you want to. Adam goes, "What's this going to cost me?" He says, "An arm and a leg." Adam thinks about it for a second and goes, "What can I get for a rib?" The rest is history. Radical self-love. So first I want to describe to you the difference between self-love, normal self-love, and radical self-love. Radical self-love does not involve a pint of ice cream. It does not involve alcohol, and it does not involve binge watching TV. Normal self-love does. But radical self-love means we want to rise and come out of it with a higher sense of self-esteem. We want to actually feel better about ourselves on the other end of it. We want to feel that sense of vitality, health, and well-being, right? I mean, if we're really loving ourselves, if we're really asking the right questions, then where we're going with that is to have ourselves rise. Because have you noticed that after the pint of ice cream, you may feel better that day, but soon enough, you're going to be your self-esteem isn't building from that. Have you noticed that? Or am I the only one here who feels lousy a couple of days after I've had that pint of ice cream? Now, I want to be clear about this talk in the sense that there are many talks I give where I'm talking from my experience of having actually mastered something. I came up with this idea of a talk because I needed to hear it. I actually want to rise to a higher place in my life that I sometimes get to, but many times do not. Many times, I'm all for that pint of ice cream. But then a couple of days later, I am not feeling so good about myself around that. Maybe you've had the same experience. Al Sid was talking on Friday about discipline and love being the keys. That the deeper we can love ourselves and hold the discipline of loving ourselves, the more we will rise to that place of radical self-love. And I heard those words, and I totally agree with them. One thing I have found about radical self-love is that it involves some level of service. So this past week, after last Sunday, my wife and I, we packed our bags and flew out that night to Asheville, North Carolina. Because the following day, I was to be judged by a panel of my peers for whether to become an ordained minister rather than just a licensed minister. The difference is, a licensed minister, they get to take back anytime they want. Or once you're ordained, they can't do that. That is a lifetime appointment. And so we showed up in Asheville about 8:30 a.m. My panel was to be at noon, 12:30. And I did not sleep well on the plane. So I decided that even though most hotels don't let you check in until 3, this hotel was going to let me check in now. And we walked into that hotel, and I walked up to the counter, and I said to the lady, I know your policy is that you don't have check-in until 3, but I really need a room now. And the lady behind the counter stared at me for about 2-3 seconds and then said, okay, and gave me the room. What was really funny about that is there were a few other ministers who were sitting on the couch who, once they saw me get a room, leaped up and were out that counter in a heartbeat. And we need a room now, too. So we get up to the room, shower, change, shave, get ready for my panel. And as we're heading out, a buddy of mine, who is the senior minister up in Alaska, needed a ride, and so he came over there with us. And there were 4 of us who were being paneled that day. And I was called first. So I get up there, and I come down about an hour later, an ordained minister. Thank you, thank you. Which is a very high acknowledgement from your peers.
Yes, it is.
So I was very, very pleased, and that went well. And then and my buddy Don had not gone yet. And so I was waiting with him, exhausted. But he needed my support, because the next thing that happened is somebody comes down and says, we don't have your panel ready yet. Why don't you go take a walk and come back in a little bit? So I go walking out with my buddy. And Ash, who has also not slept at all, is hanging in there and holding high watch. And I'm walking around with my friend Don. And about a half hour, 45 minutes later, we come back in, and they finally call him upstairs. And about an hour later, he comes down, an ordained minister. So now what Ash and I thought was going to take about an hour is taking about 5 hours. We rush back to the hotel to get, freshen up, get a little break, just in time to rush back to begin the evening's festivities. And so we go through the evening festivities, and then at the end of the night, where we greet everybody and meet everybody, and that was important to be there for that, so that people can, greet and meet. And then that night, we go to sleep, and we sleep. And we sleep. And the next day is supposed to start at 9:30. Well, I don't get there till 10:30. And as I'm walking in, ministers in our leadership are walking up to me rather annoyed because I had missed being acknowledged in front of the group, and that wasn't okay with anybody. But it was okay with me. You know why? Because I knew if I was going to make it through the rest of the week, I needed to take care of myself. I needed the sleep that I didn't get the night before. And what I notice is when we go to a place of radical self-care, now normal self-care will usually fit into other people's agenda. Have you noticed that? But radical self-care rarely does. So when we make a stand for what's truly going to feed our health, feed our well-being, there is a sense of having to rise above how others feel about it. Because if you know this is what's best for you, your spouse, partner, boss, dog, best friend, or whoever should not be overriding that, no matter how they feel about it. Because ultimately, they'll catch on. If you know what you're standing in is a sense of radical self-love, others will catch on, even if they don't feel it right then and there. The next thing I notice is that when we're not doing radical self-care, it has to do with stress, right? One of my favorite examples of this is from a movie called Airplane. Great comedy, 20, maybe even more than 20 years ago, starring Lloyd Bridges. Well, it had a ton of stars in it, but the one I want to talk about is Jeff Bridges' dad, Lloyd Bridges, who was in the traffic control tower. And when he learned that the plane was in trouble, the first things he says was, "This was a bad day to give up smoking." Pulls out a cigarette and lights it. A little bit later on, he goes, "This was a bad day to give up smoking pot." And he's smoking a joint. A little bit later, he goes, "This was a bad day to stop sniffing glue." And he's got a bag of glue, and he's doing that. And it reminded me that we actually do that. Not to that degree, maybe. But we think, okay, what's right for our health is giving up coffee. Oh, this is a bad week for that. I haven't had any sleep. This is a bad week to give. I make a commitment to giving up sugar, and then something happens, a circumstance happens, and we go, oh, this is a bad week to start that. I'll start it next week when the stress, things are less stressful. And lose the commitment that it's called for to stay in that place of radical self-love. One of the wildest things about giving up sugar or giving up coffee is the first 3 to 5 days are the worst. That's when you get headaches, when you feel so tired, you feel so down. Once you get through that, you start feeling that natural energy. Your adrenaline starts coming in its own natural way. Your adrenals kick in. All kinds of benefits start coming in if you can make it through that time when things maybe get. Have you ever noticed when you make a commitment like that's when something happens, a circumstance happens that is actually, like the worst thing ever? Have you noticed that that's when things, oh my God, this is the worst. I have this emergency. I've got this emergency. I've got that emergency. That's when those things start popping up. And yet radical self-care calls for us reaching for something higher. Now, here's an amazing thing that I have learned about this, and I actually learned it from my wife. There are times, I know it's hard for you to believe, that she gets upset with me because of something I've done. And I notice, what I noticed is because she's a coach, and has these sessions with people throughout the day, that after the first session, she's not upset anymore. And that really inspired me when I saw that. It really inspired me to take a look at, how did she do that? And then I started looking at it for myself. Started seeing that when I am of the highest service for others, I go in there beginning that already transformed. And then I realized that must be happening for her too. That she is walking into a situation where she's being, coaching somebody and being the highest and best for them. And before she even begins, she's transformed. And when I saw that, I said, well, I better do that too. And so what I started learning about that is that is the greatest sense of self-love. Radical self-love is when we are of service to others. Now, the people who got this down, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, look at their faces. They clearly know that when you are of service at the highest of levels, that feeds you and is absolutely the center of self-love. That we need to reach for that. That when we are down I heard somebody say the other day that if you have no money in your life, go find a homeless person and give them money. Or go find a cause and give them money. Because nothing will get you out of your own sense of despair faster than being of service of the highest good. The thing I notice most about my wife when she does it, or Mother Teresa, or any of these other people, is that they don't feel like they're sacrificing. They don't feel any resentment around it. What they feel is an upliftment. She comes out of those sessions completely uplifted. And then I started noticing that I do that too. When I'm up here talking to you, it doesn't matter what kind of mood I wake up in. By the time I'm here being with you, I am uplifted. I'm uplifted by being here with you. That this is when we are in this space of the highest of service. So one of the things they did in Asheville was a fire walk. Now, you've heard me talk about fire walks before. And I've walked 8 times, so I really thought, I don't need to walk again. I'll just be there, be supportive of others. And then when it came time to go out to the fire, it occurred to me that this wasn't a time for me to walk for me, but to walk for you, to walk for this community. That was a higher calling for me in this moment. So as we're going out to the fire, and I'm circling the fire and circling all the people, all of a sudden, where the beginning of the fire walk was, it was as if the sea parted. And I thought, oh, I guess I really am supposed to just walk up here, because it was just as if it was the only spot in the whole place where I was standing. The people just parted, and so I walked up. But I kept my distance, and John Waterhouse, who is the fire walk facilitator, walks first, and then he says, it's open for anybody. And I stood there, and nobody moved. And so I knew that it was mine to move first, even though I didn't know that a second before that. And so I walk up to the fire, and I'm standing there, and I ask myself the question I always do, is this mine to do? Got a yes, and I walk across this fire for you. No, for this community, for what we want to create here. And I walk slowly. I mean, we're talking, I walked at about this pace across this fire. And there was not a mark on my foot. I never felt the heat. It was gorgeous and felt magnificent and put me in a place of absolute knowing about the flourishing love, joy this community is. Because I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for you. And by doing it for you, I was in complete self-love of me. Do you get that? That it actually, it was for me because I was walking for you, because that's how radical self-love works. And I felt no sacrifice about it or anything. Now, here's the funniest part about that. Right after I walked, every alpha male in the place stepped forward like this and walked right after me. Ken Gordon, Bob Dean, all the big, they were, Harry was right there, right after me. They were all boom, boom, boom. Everybody was frozen. I walked, and then all of a sudden there was this flood, and it was all the alpha males. It was hilarious. So I challenge you. I am here to challenge you today to rise to radical self-love. That the next time you want to go for that class, and me, just so we're clear, I am challenging me too. That the next time we want to go for that glass of wine, instead ask a higher question. What will really bring me self-love? Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's going into the bath. Maybe it's journaling. You know, one of the first things we ought to be doing here, given this is a science of mind, is treating. Science of mind treatment is an incredible way to shift things. And if you're not good at science of mind, at spiritual mind treatment, take my foundations class. I promise you, by the end of that class, you will be great at treatment. You will be great at being able to raise yourself up by turning to such a powerful tool as spiritual mind treatment. I challenge you to find for yourself where your gift serves this community and humanity. I promise you that every single one of you has a gift worth giving, and that in the giving you will be fed and you will rise. That's why I'm a minister, is because I found that by doing this job, I rise. I get to be deeper in my radical self-love. I get to be deeper in my discipline and deeper in my commitment. I get to be inspired by people like my wife and you guys, because it's through inspiring each other, raising each other up, we get to have a deeper sense of self-love, higher self-esteem, higher quality of life, and the magnificence that life really has to offer. This is what's possible when we rise instead of the normal way of going about things. Let's put the normal aside. Let's find for ourselves how giving a gift will allow us to be more than who we think we are and love ourselves even more because of it. How does that sound? I love you. All right. Take out what you're going to give. Hold it in your hand. And know that this is God too. This is energy too. This is what creates the cycle of your abundance and prosperity that is created through the giving. When we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. Let's read this together. God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God.
Tu es l'image de Dieu.
I hold you in my heart.
Tu es l'image